Ranger Tess Wells' report of the 17th of July, 1976, reads succinctly, "Traces of chemical contamination detected at Source 16B, Maze District." The next day, she requested a 3-day leave of absence for personal reasons, and when she returned to duty, she brought with her evidence that eventually uncovered one of Utah's largest drug rings. Tess Wells didn't set out to become a ranger. The daughter of a police detective from Moab, she chose a career as an investigative journalist. Her articles on corruption and drug trafficking in Utah earned her several awards and a lot of trouble. Everything changed after the death of her father. Detective James Wells was found in his car with a stopped heart in 1972. The official version was a heart attack. After years of fruitless attempts to continue her father's investigations through journalism, Tess joined the Canyonlands National Park Service in 1976. The Maze District, the most remote and dangerous section of the park, known for its labyrinthine canyons and extreme temperatures, became her new home. No one questioned why a journalist with a promising career suddenly decided to become a ranger in a forgotten corner of Utah. And that was to Tess's advantage. The fewer questions, the better. She wanted to forget the past and make a fresh start. July 1976 was exceptionally hot, even by desert standards. The thermometer read up to 38 degrees in the shade, and in the canyons of the maze, the temperature rose even higher. Tess was just completing a routine check of the water sources when she learnt of the missing hiker. Paul Carter, an experienced hiker from Colorado, had disappeared without a trace on his third day in Maze. His camp was found untouched, with no signs of struggle or hasty departure. The search operation had been going on for a week with no results. Tess had no way of knowing that Carter's disappearance and her own investigation would soon intersect in a most unexpected way, and that in 3 days she would have to choose between following protocol and uncovering the truth she'd been searching for 4 years. The smell of ammonia in the desert is never natural. To Tess Wells, that smell at the water source meant only one thing: human intervention, and it wasn't touristy. Her detective father had taught her to recognize such signs. The maze area of Canyonlands National Park was virtually deserted in July 1976. Only the most experienced hikers ventured deep into its tangled canyons. Daytime temperatures exceeded 38 degrees Celsius, and at night dropped to 15 degrees, a drop that was dangerous even for trained travelers. The morning of the 17th of July began for Tess with another patrol. Source 16B was one of the most remote, located in a narrow canyon with little sunlight. Tess had prepared thoroughly. Her rucksack was stocked with water, food, navigation equipment, and a walkie-talkie, although communications in the canyons were often interrupted. When she reached the spring around noon, she immediately noticed something strange. The rocks around the spring had a whitish scum on them, uncharacteristic of natural deposits. The air was saturated with a chemical odor that contrasted sharply with the usual desert scents. Tess took samples of the water and sediment. Her journalistic instincts told her this was no accidental contamination. Ammonia, acetone, maybe even iodine, familiar signs. As she documented her find, the uncomfortable feeling of being watched never left her. Several times she interrupted her work and peered into the shadows of the canyon. Finished with her samples, Tess began to methodically explore the area around the spring. At the 10th meter, she found the first clear sign of human presence, a barely visible trail leading up the eastern wall of the canyon. Not the hiking trail marked on the maps, but a narrow strip of crumpled soil and displaced rocks. She estimated that the climb led to the upper tier of the canyon, where several caves, too small to attract tourists, were marked on the maps. Overcoming the heat, Tess began a cautious ascent. The higher she climbed, the more distinct the chemical odor became. 30 meters above the spring, the trail curved around a rocky ledge. Around the corner, a narrow vertical rift was visible in what appeared to be a solid wall. As she drew closer, she saw that it was wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The stone floor in front of the entrance bore the telltale signs of human presence: worn sand, cigarette butts, and most disturbing of all, drops of liquid, that left the same whitish residue as the source. Tess took pictures of all the details and tried to contact the base, but the radio gave only static. Her first instinct was to look into the crevice, but professional caution took over. She didn't know what might be inside and wasn't prepared for a potential confrontation. Having taken the last of the photographs, Tess was about to descend when a rustling sound was heard in the depths of the crevice. She instinctively ducked behind a rock ledge, her heart racing. The sound didn't come again, but her whole body tensed in anticipation of danger. The minutes dragged on for an agonizingly long time. Finally, deciding that the noise might have been caused by a fallen rock, she cautiously peered out. The entrance looked the same as before. Tess began her rapid descent, looking back and listening often. When she reached a safe point, she contacted the base, limiting herself to a brief message about the water contamination. Not a word about her suspicions, or that it might be related to her father's case. Lab analysis of the samples confirmed it. The water contained chemicals used in the manufacture of methamphetamine. This was no longer a simple violation of park rules. It was a criminal offense. Protocol required reporting to a supervisor, who would then contact local authorities. But after her father's death, Tess didn't trust the local police or even some of her colleagues in park administration. In her official report, she stated only the facts about the contamination, omitting the trail and the crevasse. During the night, Tess lay awake most of the night, pondering her next move. There was one person she could trust, Ray Martinez, an FBI agent from Salt Lake City, with whom she had once worked on a corruption story. Bypassing management to contact the FBI was a serious breach of protocol that could lead to dismissal, but much more was at stake. The chance to uncover the truth about his father's death and stop drug trafficking through the national park. The rule of thumb for Canyonlands Rangers is to always go through official channels. But after her father's death, Tess had forgotten how to trust the system. For 4 years, she tried to find the truth and got nothing but rejection letters and closed doors. Tess called Ray Martinez, a former colleague of her father's, now an FBI agent in Salt Lake City. He was one of the few who also doubted the official version of Detective Wells' death. Briefly and without preamble, she reported her discovery at Maze and its possible connection to her father's case. Martinez could not come before 2 days, but urged her to wait for him, advice Tess was going to ignore. On the 18th of July, Tess requested a day off. Her plan was simple: return to the cave, but better prepared. Her backpack contained the standard ranger's kit, a powerful torch, a chemical vapor mask, and her father's pistol. Tess wasn't looking for a confrontation, but her instinct for self-preservation wouldn't allow her to go unarmed. She took a detour to the canyon, using her personal motorbike instead of the conspicuous company jeep. After an hour of watching, making sure there were no people present, Tess descended to the spring and climbed up the hidden trail to the crevice. This time she didn't hesitate. Squeezing through the narrow passage, Tess moved through the tunnel, which gradually widened. The air was saturated with a chemical odor, and she put on her mask. After 50 meters and a sharp turn, Tess found herself in a spacious cave. What she saw surprised her. The room was almost empty. The floor showed the marks of recently moved heavy equipment. The walls were lined with fixtures for ventilation pipes, and there were a few canisters and cardboard boxes against the far wall. Empty plastic containers with chemical labels were lying in the corner. Everything indicated that some equipment had recently been dismantled here. She deduced from the arrangement of fixtures and remnants of tubing that one of the ventilation shafts did indeed exit directly above the source of 16B, explaining the chemical contamination of the water. In the far corner of the cave was a small hiding place, a niche hollowed out in the rock and covered with stone. Inside was a tattered map of the park with markings, a new notebook with dates and numbers, and several photographs of the canyons with coordinates on the back. One of the markings on the map was circled in red and marked with today's date, the 18th of July, 1976. The West Ridge area, about 5 kilometers from Tess's current position. Flipping through the pages of her notebook, she came across a list of names. Most told her nothing, but one made her heart beat faster. W. Reed, Victor Reed, Moab's chief of police at the time of her father's death, the man who had officially closed the investigation into Detective Wells's death as natural. Tess continued to look around the cave and soon discovered something strange, notches on the wall that looked like coding or a cipher. Next to them was the inscription JW, the initials of her father, James Wells, and the year of his death. It couldn't be a coincidence. Suddenly, voices were heard outside. Tess extinguished the lantern and took cover behind a rock ledge. Two men with lanterns entered the cave. They were looking around the room and discussing something about the effectiveness of the last move. From their conversation, Tess realized that the group regularly changed the location of their lab, moving between different maze caves, an ideal strategy for avoiding detection. They left the cave. As soon as the footsteps died down, Tess stepped cautiously out of hiding. She quickly but carefully left the cave the way she had come in. Already on the path down to the canyon, Tess felt the ground shake. When she looked back, she saw dust rising from the crevice. It looked like there had been a collapse in the cave. Intentional or accidental, it could have buried the remaining evidence and evidence of her visit. Reaching the motorbike, Tess unfolded the confiscated map. The red marker pointed to the area known to the rangers as West Ridge, one of the most inaccessible and rarely patrolled sections of maze. Judging by the markings, the drug traffickers used at least 5 different locations, cycling their equipment between them. Analyzing the findings, Tess began to understand the pattern. The group appeared to have been working in the park for years, perhaps since the early 1970s, when her father had started investigating. They moved the mobile lab between remote caves every few weeks, leaving a minimum of footprints. For normal patrols, such a system was virtually elusive. But what did his father's initials in the cave mean? Had he discovered their operation shortly before his death? And what role had Victor Reed played? Tess knew one thing: the answers could be waiting for her on the West Ridge, where, judging by the red marker, the drug traffickers had moved their lab. In the cramped cave with limited oxygen and a collapsed exit, Tess looked through the drug cartel's files. On the last page of the report, she saw a signature. The handwriting belonged to a man she'd known since childhood, her father's former partner, and now Moab's police chief. The Western Ridge greeted Tess with a pre-dawn chill. On the 19th of July, she arrived before sunrise, carefully parking her motorbike in a natural hiding place among the rocks. The military binoculars she'd inherited from her father were her main tool. From a safe distance, she could observe the coordinates marked on the map. The first 2 hours of observations were inconclusive, but as the sun rose above the horizon, Tess noticed movement near one of the rock formations. 2 men emerged from the almost invisible cave entrance, climbed into a nearby parked pickup truck, and drove off toward the main road. They returned another hour later with packages and canisters. Tess recorded key evidence, canisters, burners, notes, on a camera with a telephoto lens. She needed hard evidence, not emotion and conjecture. By midday, she had enough images to confirm activity in the cave, but she needed to wait until nightfall to be sure. As dusk fell, there was more activity at the cave. A second car arrived, a black SUV with tinted windows. Tess held her breath as 3 men in business suits got out, one of whom was Victor Reed. Even from a distance, his large figure and distinctive gait were unrecognizable. It was the last confirmation Tess needed. The former Moab police chief who had closed the case of her father's death had personally visited the drug lab in a remote part of the park. She took a series of pictures, paying particular attention to faces and license plates. Waiting until Reed's SUV left the car park around midnight, Tess cautiously descended from her observation position and headed for her motorbike. She had a clear plan: deliver the evidence immediately to Agent Martinez, who was due to arrive in Moab in the morning. In a motel on the outskirts of Moab, Tess had been preparing a detailed report until dawn. In addition to the photos, she had a map of all 5 locations of the mobile lab, the chemical evidence she'd found, and most importantly, circumstantial evidence of Reed's involvement in her father's death. Not enough for a murder charge, but more than enough for a search and arrest warrant in a drug case. Martinez arrived at 7 a.m., just after a tiring overnight flight from Salt Lake City. Despite his fatigue, he scrutinized all the materials Tess had presented, making notes and nodding occasionally. The experienced agent quickly appreciated the significance of the find. "This is very serious, Tess. You did a great job," Martinez said as he looked through the photos, "especially these shots of Reed. We suspected him of having ties to drug traffickers, but until now we had no direct evidence." Martinez immediately contacted the FBI's Salt Lake City regional office and started the process of obtaining warrants. Tess was surprised at the speed with which the gears of the federal investigation were turning. By noon, the operation was fully planned, and by evening, the agents were already arriving in small groups, staying in various motels in Moab to maintain secrecy. Martinez had insisted that Tess not participate in the raid itself. "You've already done your part of the job, and quite a bit," he said. "Now it's our responsibility." Tess understood his logic, but she couldn't just sit and wait. They came to a compromise. She would stay at the operations command center, helping with navigation and knowledge of the area, but would not go to the scene of the arrest. The raid began at dawn on the 20th of July. 3 teams of FBI agents, backed up by rangers and local police, carefully selected by officers not affiliated with Reed, moved simultaneously toward the West Ridge. Tess watched the coordination from a temporary command post set up in the ranger's office. The operation had gone almost flawlessly. 6 workers and 2 guards were detained at the lab. Equipment, chemicals, and most importantly, documentation were confiscated. At the same time, another group of agents searched Victor Reed's house in Moab and arrested him on charges of organizing drug production. In Reed's personal safe, agents found key clues: a shabby diary with entries from 1972 that mentioned Detective Wells's name and the mysterious M protocol, as well as a vial containing the residue of a rare poison that causes heart attack symptoms. The date of the last entry coincided exactly with the day Tess's father died. A cache found in one of the lab walls revealed complete documentation of the relocation system: dates, locations, cave plans, names of those responsible. The cartel had been operating in Canyonlands for over 5 years, regularly changing production sites to avoid detection by regular ranger patrols. On the wall of the main cave behind the chemical warehouse, Martinez found something that definitively linked the past to the present. Carved into the stone were the initials JW and a barely visible date: June 1972, a week before Detective Wells died. Her father had actually found one of the labs and left his mark, his last signature before his death. When Martinez showed Tess a photograph of this find, she finally felt that the years-long search had come to an end. Her father didn't die of a heart attack. He was murdered for getting too close to the truth. And now, 4 years later, his daughter has completed the work he started. October colored the Canyonlands cliffs an even richer shade of red. Tess Wells stood atop island in the sky, watching the setting sun turn the horizon golden. It had been 3 months since the West Ridge operation that had changed everything. The drug cartel trial was still going on. Victor Reed and 11 other defendants awaited sentencing. There was enough evidence not only to charge them with drug production and distribution, but also to reopen the investigation into the death of Detective James Wells. After the case was solved, Tess was offered a return to journalism. Several major publications were interested in her story, but she declined. Working as a ranger in Canyonlands became more than just a way for her to escape her past. She fell in love with the wilderness, its rugged beauty, and the secrets hidden in the stone labyrinths. Tess was transferred to the park's education department. She now trained new rangers, focusing on recognizing signs of illegal activity and security protocols in remote areas. The mobile drug lab system uncovered through her investigation became a showcase case for National Park Service rangers across the country. Rangers now knew what to look for when checking remote caves and canyons. One mystery, however, remained unsolved. The disappearance of hiker Paul Carter, the starting point of the investigation, had no explanation. Neither in the cartel's documents nor in the testimonies of the arrested drug traffickers was there any mention of him. His traces were lost in maze in the summer of 1976, as if the desert had swallowed him up without a trace. Canyonlands National Park holds its secrets, and some of them may never be fully revealed. But thanks to one ranger's determination, at least one dark page of its history has been closed and justice has been served. Friends, you've just heard the story of the events at Canyonlands, about a ranger who uncovered not only a network of drug labs, but also the mystery of his father's death. But what happened to missing hiker Paul Carter? Was his disappearance linked to a drug cartel, or is that a different story? And what if similar mobile labs are operating in other national parks right now? Write your opinion in the comments. If the story hooked you as much as it did me, support the channel by liking and subscribing. Many more mysteries from America's wildest corners lie ahead. See you in the next issue.